The last two items to come off this G10 motor before I remove the pistons and the crank are the end plate, which houses the seal on the transmission end of the crank, and the oil pump, which is also a seal plate for the front of the motor. As you can see, I've got the hardware sort of laid out the way it was. That is a long bolt, a long bolt, a long bolt, and then down here are short bolts. It's in the manual if you need to look it up. On this end you have 3 short bolts and 2 long bolts near the top. And the only thing I noticed odd about this is this particular bolt right here must go into a water jacket or something, because it was definitely hard to get out and sort of bound up. One other thing that I always do at this point in time, after I get all the hardware buffed, I bag and tag it. And in some cases, like in this case, I've got long, short kind of thing for identification of oil pump hardware. Here's the block now. Next thing we'll be taking off will be the pistons in order. Can't show the back plate area too well because it's hidden by my motor stand. Okay, I've begun the process of removing the pistons. I've gotten everything loosened up, taken one of them out already, and I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to some of the details I have in this block, which really assist you. For instance, the caps that hold the main bearings in and the crank in all have arrows on them. They're all numbered, which is very helpful when you're reassembling. I might also draw attention to something that probably took me more time than it's going to be taking it apart, and that is making this box so I can store these pistons if I have to store them for a period of time and know which ones go where. They too have arrows on them. There's an arrow on the cap here, and there's an arrow on the, if I can get the light right, there's an arrow on the piston here. All those things should be helpful when you go to reassemble. So far everything looks good. I looked at this first journal here on the crank. It looks pretty decent. What I'm going to do now is remove the rest of the pistons. What essentially I do is take the bolts off, or the nuts off, with the impact wrench. I found I had to use a standard socket because there's not enough room in here to put an impact socket, but it was no problem. And then what I'll do is just slightly tap them down with the handle of a mallet until they come out, and just take care doing it. One of the other things I did was to take a look at these rings, and they all look in pretty decent condition. Even the oil ring, which it looked like it was bound up, it really wasn't. So I'm thinking that this engine was in pretty decent shape, other than the scale it had on it, which I think was what gave me a bad leak down test. Let's go ahead and take the center piston out, or number 2 piston. Leather mallet. I'm going to use the handle on it. Hold my hand under the piston. Caps off. Here's the bearing in there. It has a little scratch in it. Doesn't look like the journal scratched at all. You got to be careful down here because you don't want the connecting rod scoring anything, so just make sure it's all free. Here you go, hollow. When it goes hollow like that, it means it's about to come out. Here's this piston, number 2, pretty decent shape. See that oil on it? There's a little score on the bearings, but it doesn't. I don't see it on the journal at all. That's it. Do the third one and we'll be ready to take the crank out. Now in the process of removing the bearing caps. I've got 2 of them pulled already. The other 2 are broken loose. It's pretty simple. You know, they basically look like this. Bearing's in pretty good shape. This is number 1. Number 2. It's nice that they're numbered and they have an arrow on them so you know which end they point to. And when I take these out, I usually rock them like this. I don't pry because this is a aluminum block. And I don't think it's a good idea to pry on an aluminum block. It's number 3. And number 4. I looked at the journals. They're in pretty good shape. The only thing I found sort of odd, there's a little scraping on this. When I took the 2 screws out of this particular bolts out of this particular hole here, I saw some residue water and there's some bubbling in the oil. So I think when I power wash this thing, something must have been leaking. Either where the oil filter goes in, which is right there, or from something else. Now I can lift the crank out. It sounds like one of the bearings dropped. That's it. This is a nice little crank. I like this crank. It's in pretty decent shape. One thing I failed to mention is there's on the 3rd journal, which is right here, are 2 shims, and they are there for end play. And you can see they have a groove, and on this one there's a groove, and it faces out. In the last portion of the video, you might have heard a clinking sound. That was when I'm falling on the ground.